Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to TLG Talks for this Thursday. I'm Gene Trowbridge with the Trowbridge Law Group, and this is our series of interviews with people who are instrumental in the world of syndication and securities. And today it's my special pleasure to have Amy Wan with us. Now, Amy and I have known each other for a very long time, and I'm very excited about having her with us because we're going to talk about something that I don't think any of my other guests have talked about or probably will talk about. So, Amy, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Gene.
Well, it's my pleasure. And Amy and I are going to talk about, and I'm going to read some of this stuff so I get it all right. We're going to talk about using blockchain to tokenize real estate syndications. And like I said, no one else has talked about this. I've done about 27 interviews, and I thought it was time that we would get into this. And Amy is a pioneer in this area and has been all over the country talking about this. So I want her to share this with us. And are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
Okay, first question. What is blockchain and cryptocurrency, and what does it have to do with real estate?
Sounds good. Okay, so if we're going to get really, really basic, so back in 2009, a anonymous or pseudonymous person or group of people called Satoshi Nakamoto put a white paper out into the world, and that white paper was basically about Bitcoin. Now, I'm sure many people have heard about Bitcoin. It is a type of cryptocurrency, or you might call it a virtual currency, right? The interesting thing about Bitcoin is that there can only be 21 million ever, right? So the reason why people are fanatical about Bitcoin is because you don't get what is basically happening now and has happened with many countries over the past several decades, which is currency devaluation, right? Right now, our government is printing out trillions of dollars, and so what happens is the value of each dollar, the spending power of it, becomes less and less because it's so easy to just put more into the supply. The dollar used to be backed by a gold standard. It is not anymore. So what that means is if you put out a dollar into the world or printed out a dollar, you used to have a dollar of gold. That basically disappeared after World War II. So a lot of people think Bitcoin is really interesting because it truly is sound money in that it can't really be devalued. You can't just create more of it very easily, right? People are continue to mine it using computing power, but there can only ever be 21 million ever. Um, Bitcoin is built on blockchain technology, which actually, it's interesting. People make blockchain out to be this like crazy thing, but actually what they did was they just took a lot of pre-existing technologies and packaged it together in a way that other people hadn't done before. And what blockchain does is it solves the double spend problem. So what that means is that it's not like I log on to my bank account and hopefully all their servers are functioning correctly and they have the correct bank number, but if or they have the correct dollar amount in my bank account. But if they don't, I'm really screwed, right? If someone goes and like bombs where their servers are and they don't have that information anymore, I'm done. Um, Blockchain, on the other hand, is kind of like having a lot of digital carbon copies, but all around the world. And what all these carbon copies do is every time there's a transaction on the network, you just put another entry on that carbon copy paper and it's continually all the pieces of carbon copy paper around the world are just continually syncing with each other. So if this one has a transaction, they will all reflect that transaction. So if someone, atom bombed, one location with that carbon copy, that that particular record of transactions, it's okay because there's all these clones, all these other carbon copies around the world that still have the records of all the transactions. So that's blockchain and cryptocurrency in a nutshell. Cryptocurrency ever since Bitcoin, there's just been a ton of them. Most of them, I think, are securities, but Bitcoin and Ethereum, the SEC has said, are not. And in terms of how that ties in with real estate, there's a couple of different things, right? So the first is there are a lot of people saying, hey, blockchain solves the double spend problem. It's very good at record keeping. Maybe we can apply that to the title industry, the real estate title industry, because sometimes we don't know who owns title, right? Every state has different rules about whether you were the first to file or the first to give notice, race notice or just race and all these things. And the title industry in the US has become, it's very large. It's very incumbent, right? And a lot of people are looking to disrupt that. So there actually was a startup based in Orange County a couple years ago called vlox.re, and they were working with Cook County in Illinois, and they did a pilot about basically putting real estate title on blockchain. I think it was actually very successful. The only problem is, at least in the U.S., there's not a lot of power. There's not enough. What do you call it? There just isn't enough oomph for people to.
No impetus.
Yes, impetus. Yeah, to switch from the current title, the incumbent title industry, into one that's much more technologically advanced. And so, experts predict that blockchain real estate title is going to take off faster in developing countries than in the US, which is unfortunate, but that's what it is. The second thing is, people are using crypto to buy real estate and invest in real estate, right? And that doesn't get into as many legal issues. It's really just AML KYC, making sure that we're not violating any anti-money laundering laws or terrorist sanctioning laws, things like that. And the third thing that's really interesting that I think we're really talking about today is people who are trying to tokenize real estate in order to achieve more liquidity for investors.
Okay, well, going back a little bit, all this is virtual. All this is online. There is no physical Bitcoin. And there is no physical cryptocurrency. Everything is in the clouds in the world. Okay. And so when you say people are using this to tokenize real estate, what would the benefits be of that? Why would we want to know that?
Sure. So for a syndicator that wants to provide an additional benefit to their investor, it's usually going to be in a situation where it's like an indefinite hold or it's a very long period of holding the property. Investors obviously want liquidity at some point, and if the syndicator can't provide them to that, maybe the regular market can, right? So, every time we sit down and we draft a PPM, it always says there is no secondary market for these securities. You should not expect that there will be a secondary market. And as you and I know, when investors, maybe they come into a life situation, maybe there's a medical emergency or something, if they need liquidity, oftentimes they'll email the syndicator and be like, hey, I'm in this rut. And there's really very, very little the syndicator can do unless they've, done some very interesting structuring when they did the offering, right? And even if there is another buyer who wants to buy the security off of the original investor, it's not easy, right? So first of all, we have Rule 144, which says that, for a period of 12 months after you invest, you cannot sell the security. After 12 months, if you sell it, you still have to follow securities laws and blue skies laws, which means that, let's say, Gene, you're the original investor, and I am very interested in buying your interests in ABC syndication. Well, first of all, we usually have to have a third-party intermediary to do this through, right? It doesn't really have that much to do with the issuer. It has to do with you and me. You are now the issuer. You have to go and do blue skies filings. You have to go to the original sponsor and gather up all the material updates and disclosures. You have to put together the offering. All of that is a lot of transactional costs. There's a third party middleman who's brokering this, and that's usually what, like 5 figures of fees, right? So by the time that that transaction happens when I buy it off of you, there's just not a lot left. Like, unless you had, a couple $1 million worth of that security and I bought it off of you, the transactional costs usually do not make sense if you're going to be fully compliant with securities laws. So the interesting thing about tokenizing real estate is, in the beginning, it's not exactly the same, but it's almost all the same, right? In that there's still an offering memorandum, you still need securities attorneys. What's going to be different is that you are going to, first of all, you're going to need a token agent. There's a few of them today. Securitize is probably the most popular one. That token agent is going to take, your investment opportunity and tokenize it. So that basically, investors, they used to just have a written subscription agreement. Now you have a written subscription agreement, and then when you, for example, log on to your account on Securitize, you can see like, oh, here are my tokens, right? But what Securitize does with their technology is that they have taken all the all the securities regulations around secondary markets, and they've used smart contracts to basically code what can and cannot happen. So theoretically now, you don't need a middleman anymore that's going to charge like 5 figures to get a secondary market transaction done. Um, if you have these original securities and I want to buy them from you, and this was a tokenized security, we could just press a couple buttons on the platform. The system will double check a lot of things to make sure everything's compliant with regulations on my side, on your side. It'll tell us what we do, and then it just happens, and it's instant, right? It's not something that takes super long, a large number of months, and that's because all the regulations have been basically coded into smart contracts. And of course, the pipe dream is that these will all be super liquid, like what you see with securities on the stock market nowadays. So you have exchanges like T0 and Open Finance, which, if a sponsor wants to, and if they've tokenized their opportunity, you can basically, list. It's almost like going public, but it's not, because it's with private securities, right? You list your securities on these exchanges, and you can have a liquid market where people want to buy and sell after 12 months.
Isn't that's very interesting. I can tell you that I have not had, knock on wood, I do quite a bit of business. I have not had anyone come to me today and say, I want to do a syndication and I want to tokenize it. I have not had that. But I bet there are people out there who are doing that, who are making a market for that. Are there many people out there who could help? If someone came to me, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to say, well, I'd like to refer you to Amy.
So, yes and no. There are people out there doing it. There are not a lot of people out there doing it, right? It's still a very exotic thing. We are still in the nascency of this industry. Our firm has represented two of them. One of them we pretty much got everything teed up, but then I think they were supposed to like syndicate like some super fancy skyscraper in New York City, and then at the very end, like they just couldn't pull together all the investor funds. So the deal fell apart for a reason other than, all the
Hmm.
blockchain stuff. The second one we're actually doing right now, and it's interesting. It's a multifamily sponsor. And what they did was, like the securitize fees are not for the faint of heart. I mean, the last time I checked, it's probably like, a setup fee of maybe like $50,000, $60,000. So you obviously want a very big project to be doing this to justify those transaction fees. But I think they went to Securitize and they said, hey, I'm a very experienced sponsor. I want to do 10 of these. And so they were able to negotiate a drastically reduced price with Securitize because they committed to like doing 10 of them. So, what I would say is this is probably in the realm of more sophisticated sponsors with a lot of experience who are doing larger deals. That's who we kind of see doing these things today. Actually, they did tokenize the St. Regis Aspen Hotel out in Aspen, Colorado. That was an interesting one. They did it through a Reg A Plus. Um, I haven't followed it in a while, so I don't know how successful it ended up being, but like it's the St. Regis.
Yeah, well, sure, and that would have been a big offering. That's all quite interesting. I will listen to uh, the business news radio station every morning, and they always talk about this. And I haven't invested in this, but I know that you can buy pieces of currency. You don't have to buy what is they're almost like $40,000 each now.
Yes,
Very
there's a bull
close.
run
So,
today.
so you're not going to buy a whole one, maybe, but you can buy bits and pieces. So they're working on that to make it more available to people and
Hmm.
make it more liquid and very, 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 very interesting. So I thank you for that explanation. And like I said, that'll be unusual on our YouTube channel, and we'll see if we can send some people to watch that, and then they'll contact you for some help. My series of interviews here, Amy, um, has a purpose, and it's to talk to rookies. Other
Hmm.
than you, I've asked all the people, how'd you get into business? What's your business plan? And they all say the same thing. Hey, I found a piece of real estate. I couldn't buy it myself,
Hmm.
so I had to get some people. And one of the things I've learned is you can't do this yourself.
Hmm.
You need a group, and that's constant feedback. But you've been involved in just the normal uh, dollar and cent checkbook financing. You've been a corporate attorney for a big firm doing all this. You've been a private syndication attorney doing offerings for people. Uh, what would your advice be to a rookie, someone who's maybe has some real estate experience but has never done a syndication? What advice would you share
Yeah.
with us?
I mean, well, I would certainly say don't jump to tokenizing real estate because that is probably not quite in the vein for a rookie yet. Um, but, I would say, first of all, it's kind of like just your social network in general. You never know when you're going to need to rely on them when you actually need them, right? And so same for raising capital. You always want to be networking with investors before you actually need to, get money from those investors. I get a lot of people who call and are like, I'm a rookie syndicator. I've never done this before. I want to crowd fund. And I'm like,
Yes.
don't do that. you know, um, crowdfunding, whether you're doing 506C or Reg CF with the the new rules, which we'll see how they pan out in the new administration. But crowdfunding is an exercise that I think is probably better for more experienced syndicators. A lot of people are like, well, I tell them, hey, if it's your first one, start off with family and friends. And they're like, but I have no family and friends. And then I say, well, then you're out of luck, because if your family and friends won't even invest in you, why would strangers invest in you, right? So, you want to start small first, learn the process, learn the ropes, constantly networking for new investors. And then when you get to a certain point where you have a track record, maybe you've exhausted the capital from your network of people, which, it's going to take some time, because after you start showing a good track record, people are going to want to throw more money in, and they're going to refer you to their friends and their family, right? So it's going to be a while before you actually get to the point where maybe you're like, oh, maybe I do want to crowdfund. I think a lot of people just jumped to crowdfunding because they're like, online advertising, it's going to be so awesome. And I'm like, yeah, you're going to lose a lot of money in online advertising.
Right. I think that, and I've told many people that you and I both get homework calls. I call them homework calls. Someone says, well, you better call an attorney and talk and find out how this works. So they call you or me. And I tell the people that, yes, the property you're going to syndicate for your first deal is important. You wouldn't syndicate anything that if you had all the money yourself, you wouldn't buy. But no one is going to invest in your first deal because of the property. They're going to invest because they want to, because Amy has found an opportunity that she likes and she can handle herself. And so she's making the opportunity available to her close network of people. And they're going to invest because of Amy. And you're absolutely right. You always have to be building a database constantly. And you've heard me talk about that. I'm interested in the investors having continuity. Probably the number one thing, I think. If I were a passive investor, I'd ask you, Amy, if I give you my $50,000 and go in this deal, what happens if something happens to you? And then we have a real live example of this right now. We had a syndicator who late last year came to us and was going to buy a 700 pad mobile home park in Louisiana with the possibility of building another 400 pads. And he was a businessman, the company, and he was going to be the sole managing member. And I said, no, not with me, you're not. Go somewhere else, but I'm not going to do that. You need to pick someone in your organization, give them 5 or 10%, so that when someone asks you the question, what happens if something happens to you, you can answer it, that you have continuity. And lo and behold, he died of COVID.
No.
And here was this 10% owner, maybe 25 years old, picked up, never missed a beat, moved right forward. The investors were fine.
Wow.
Everything is great. And now I'm having the same discussion with that guy who thought he landed in a gold mine. I said, well, you've already seen it happen. Who are you going to pick for continuity?
Right.
Every day you're risking your investors' money. And I want to talk about COVID, but I will tell you right now that I have a speaker next week who is my family law, my wills and trust attorney, who's going to come in and talk to us about what happens to the interest in an LLC if an investor dies. And what prompted this is last week I got a call from a syndicator who was really upset with me that my operating agreement, Amy, didn't say, well, if you die and you're a single person, it goes to your will. If you die and it's community property, it goes to your wife. If it's joint tenants, it doesn't say all this. The subscription agreement says, how do you want to take title? And you check it and you take title. And now this guy wanted that he could be able to tell the people what's going to happen with their interest after they die. I said, no. So Rick is going to come on next week and we're going to go through about 7 popular ways of taking title. And we're going to talk about what happens
That's
when
awesome.
someone dies, because we do have some investors um, dying, and that's something. But that continuity question is good. Many of the syndicators that I've talked to and asked that same question, they really say, this is not a do-it-yourself business.
Right.
Get some people, and you would agree with that. Get some people around you and go forward, because you can't do it all.
Yeah.
And it's too risky for the investors to have just you do it all. So we do that. Another thing I'm moving toward, Amy, is having investors, passives, take some responsibility for educating themselves on the asset class before they invest. Because the syndicator, you and I could do a deal and we could tell the people about our deal, but we haven't told the people about the world of real estate or multifamily or mobile home parks or whatever. And there's plenty of education out there. You could join a group if you want to do mobile home parks and go to one of their virtual week-long classes and learn. I think you owe it to yourself. I think the word sophisticated changes with the offering. A couple of years ago, Jillian and I did a deal on racehorses, a Reg A Plus offering on racehorses. Okay. So I think to be sophisticated, to invest in a racehorse offering is different than being sophisticated and investing in a 32-unit apartment.
Yeah.
Do you agree? So I think that definition changes with what it is and who's responsible for that. I think in some regards, the investors. And I'm only bringing this up because you gave all this talk about crypto and Bitcoins and everything. And there are a lot of passive investors who listen to my deals.
Of
and course. I'm going to say, before you go invest in that, you need more than what we just talked about for 15 minutes, right?
Well, of course, crypto is very volatile and very speculative. And as with every investment, you should only invest what you are willing to lose, right?
Oh, boy, I've heard that before.
But it's interesting. Like you're talking about self-education as an investor, and I know there are people out there who maybe they'll throw like maybe 20 or 40 grand at a friend because they trust them, right? And they don't really understand the underlying deal. I actually just joined a mastermind myself. It's a virtual one. And it's specifically only for passive investors who they're all like doctors, lawyers, like professionals, high net worth people. And we're all, subject matter experts on different things and trying to teach each other. We have some people in the group who invest in multifamily syndication, some people are into self-storage, some people are into like these crazy life insurance policies. There's going to be a whole thing on options trading. They've all gotten into crypto lately, but it's been a nice group because I've certainly learned a lot. Obviously I know all the stuff on the securities law side for real estate syndications, but there's certainly a lot to be said about the actual underwriting side, whether you're going to be a sponsor or a passive investor, which, absolutely, I think you should fully understand the deal before you jump in.
Well, that's one of the things I've always, in my marketing package, if I have a marketing package, is to say that, my 16, 17 years as a syndicator prepared me, my career as a commercial real estate broker prepared me to be a syndicator, prepared me to go to law school and be a securities attorney. It's all building blocks on top of each other. Well, this was really terrific of you to take the time out today, and I appreciate it. It's good to see you. Jonathan says hello to you.
Tell him I say hi back.
We say hi to you and your baby and your husband, and hope everything works well as we come out of whatever we're coming out of as far as this COVID-19. And to think that every day you send your husband off to the hospital to be a doctor, and that's frightening. Jonathan's wife is OBGYN, every day she goes to the hospital and comes home, and you have special things to worry about. So our prayers and our thoughts are with you. And let me say thank you one more time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. You have taught me so much of what I know, and I'm always grateful for you and for you having me on your show.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Okay, take care. Bye.